My name is Edwige Simon, and I'm the Senior Director of Learning and Technology Solutions at ICLS. And I have been running this book club for, I think, almost 10 years. The book club actually started when I was working at the University of Colorado Boulder, and I ran it for 3 or 4 years there. And then when I moved to ICLS, there was really nobody to take it over. So I let it go for a little bit. And then when I realized that nobody was picking it up, I went back and I just I took it over. So we read 2 to 3 books per year, and our book club members, and I think it's Karen, or I forget if it's Karen or Megan, who was asking how many people are in the book club. On the book club list, we actually have hundreds of people. We have hundreds of educators. But we have a group, every time we read a book, we get a group of anywhere from 10 to sometimes 50 people reading the book. It depends really very much on the time of the year. In the summer, we get more. It also depends on the book. So, um, and teachers can get CEUs or graduate credit from the University of the Pacific to participate in the book club. And the way it is set up is usually, like I said, so we vote for a book. So the members vote for the book they want to read. So there are different rounds of votes. And then I usually break down the book in 5 to 7 weeks, depending on the length. And then it's all asynchronous. So every week on Friday, I post the questions for the coming week. And then participants have the whole week to participate at their leisure. I jump in, I participate as well. And then we wrap up the week, and then the following Friday, I post the next set of questions. So it's very relaxed, but it's very enjoyable because we get people from everywhere in the world. So we get so many different perspectives. And frankly, you get to meet really cool people. So that's my little promo for the book club. And this fall, we read learner feedback. So Karen, if you want to do the book. Um,
Sure.
so this book is available on the Actful website, and it is also available on Amazon, and it also is available as an ebook if you prefer to read on a reader or a tablet. Um, I'll have to say that when I first got the book, I thought, oh my gosh, it's a it's such a huge book.
I thought so too.
Right? I remember we talked about this. You got the book and you were thinking, oh my gosh, it's such a big book. And it's interesting. One of the book club members said, at first I was very intimidated by the book, but it
Mhm.
has a very consistent structure, and there is so many tables and scaffolding structures for readers to learn how to actually apply the framework. It's really well done. So thank you very much for writing this book. And I'm going to ask you guys to introduce yourself, starting with Sarah.
Hi, I'm Sarah Strauss, and I'm a National Board Certified Teacher. And I teach full time at Minnetonka High School. I'm a Spanish teacher. And I also do some cultural competency trainings through Minnesota Professional Licensing Board.
Great. And you said you're in Minnesota, right? Okay. Megan?
Hi, my name is Megan Budke. We're all in Minnesota, actually. We're the Minnesota team, as we referred to ourselves when we were writing the book. Um, I taught level one middle school Spanish for 12 years, and now I work for St. Paul Public Schools as the Immersion Indigenous and World Language Coordinator. So I oversee five dual language immersion programs, 13 Indigenous and World languages, and my team also supports the bilingual seal. And I will turn it over to Karen.
Great. Thanks. Thanks, Sarah. Thanks, Megan. Thanks, Edwidge. Good to be here. I got to be with you all before you wrote the book, before you read the book, and happy to be back. My name's Karen Nickel, and I'm here in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I've been in education for about 35 years, mainly taught German and some EL during that time. Now I work as an instructor through Concordia College in Moorhead, Minnesota. But what I do is I actually work with students in their clinical when they're in their student teaching experiences in the classrooms here in the Minneapolis area. And then I'm also working at the University of Minnesota, taught a curriculum design course last semester, and I'm getting to teach an assessment course this semester using our books. So I'm super, super excited about that. Um, and yeah, I do consulting as well. There is life after many years in the classroom. Retirement. I like to tell people I don't retire. I didn't retire very well, really, because I have kind of a second career. But thanks to Sarah and Megan, they kicked it off because we were writing that book before I retired and into my retirement. So that was a great transition.
Great. Well, thank you so much. I'm so excited that I got the three of you. I really wanted the three of you on this
Yeah.
webinar. So I'll start with the first question. As I mentioned, some of our participants found the feedback format a little bit overwhelming at first, and I think it was due to the size of the book, really. But what advice would you give people who feel a little bit overwhelmed? And also connected to this question, how often should feedback be given, and how much is enough feedback? I know it's a big question, but we'll start with Sarah.
So, I'm, as a teacher in the classroom, I've done feedback with the IB program a lot, but I really liked how this Glow and Grow transitions into other programs, AP or just regular teaching without that. Um, I find that in my program, we do 3 units per semester. And in that unit, we will have 3 summative assessments, one being the interpretive, one being the presentational, and one being the interpersonal. And so when I'm really giving this glow and grow feedback, it's on the performance assessment of each chapter. So that in the end, that really equates to 6 times throughout the semester. And that's how I've done it. I will do some formatives. And when I do the formative, it might just be I'm targeting one of the domains. So we might just be working on text type. And so that's the feedback I'll give for them on that. Um, but so, I don't do it all every time. I think you do want to be purposeful with when you're giving them feedback. But I also want to challenge us to think that even though we are giving them a summative assessment, they're still learning. Like I use summative assessments for learning. And so it's their opportunity to get feedback from me. So I hope I don't, if that's what I would
Megan,
say on it.
do you want to add something, Megan?
Yeah, I would actually, Sarah answered very similar to what I would say. I would also say the book represents like 10 plus years of us being in the classroom and doing this work, and none of us started here. This is just like where we got towards and put it in the end. So if they're feeling overwhelmed and they're looking for a starting place, all three of us actually started with the performance assessments and really learning how to evaluate learner work well. Like that was our starting point. And then from there, we started building in the feedback framework, adding in a self-assessment, finalizing what the comments would be and how they'd be effective. So a person can kind of take one piece and do it really well and then continue to add on a piece. And then similar to Sarah, like how much feedback and enough, and then just trying to be manageable. I did similar to Sarah, and like I really focused my feedback on the summative assessments.
Okay.
And I tried to pick like one formative assessment per unit in which I'd give more in-depth feedback. And then I really tried to utilize the self-assessments a lot. So making sure students knew what the indicators were and that they could do a lot of self-assessment. So they were always trying to see where they were at and where they needed to go next.
Mm-hmm. Um, we did have our more experienced teachers comment on the fact that, for example, they were familiar with the grow and glow feedback, or they were doing some forms of student assessment. So I think, when you're a teacher, when you're a brand new teacher, all those things are new to you. But if you have a few years of teaching under your belt, you have seen some of those pieces, and
Mhm.
you've probably tried them at some point. Karen, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I'll just a couple of things. I think we're, somewhat, I don't want to reiterate anything, but I do know that, we came about this book because we wanted a guidebook because we didn't have one. And so we wanted to offer a guidebook. So as Megan said, we put a lot into it because that's what we were looking for. And so I can understand why it's a little bit overwhelming to people. Um, as far as the, formative and summative, I mean, the more that we use the same rubrics in our formative work as
Yes.
our summative work, and I think that was implied, but perhaps not directly said. And so I wanted to directly say it, because when we are assessing formatively, it's really helpful because by the time that we get to the summative, the students understand the rubric, they know how to look at their own work, they know what they're looking for in various domains. And lastly, if you just want to start somewhere, start with the text type domain, I would suggest, and text type presentational, and just help students look at work to see where it is and guide them and how they can change their work to reach a higher performance level, and then give Glow and Grow to them as the summative. And then, then there's all kinds of things in the book to help you, like the learner feedback guides, look back at those things. But to try to do it all at once is, depending on where you are in your career and what things you're already familiar with, it is a lot. But we wanted to give it all to you. You can use it as you can.
And it is a lot because you provide so much scaffolding for the teachers through the book. Like you're presenting the framework and then you give an opportunity to practice. Like there are literally some practice activities that we did in the book club. And by the time you are on, I would say, chapter 4, at least I felt like I had a good grip on the framework, and then I could see how it was a similar framework applied to a different context every time. So, and I really enjoyed like the repetition and the consistency of the framework. I think it's super useful. Um, Next question. So in your book, you have a very interesting stance on feedback. You don't focus on what the students are doing wrong, but instead you are focusing on what they need to do to reach the next level. So first of all, I love this. I think it's a very positive way to give feedback. How is this different from how feedback is typically given, in your experience? And we can start with Megan this time.
I think we all went through teaching with a red pen and error correction and called that feedback. So, yeah, it's been a transition as we did the research and really found what was effective and apply that to language learning. Um, I think for me, just seeing myself, I think I see myself and I hear from a lot of teachers that feedback has been error correction, feedback has been grade in the grade book, feedback has been praise. Um, but when we just kind of look at the evidence, we didn't find, a lot of that was actually leading to language growth. And so we were really interested in kind of looking at the evidence and the research and saying, how would we apply this to world language teaching? And also, I think also trying to frame it in a can-do mindset. ACTFL's come out with so much stuff about their performances and can-dos, and so we really wanted to mimic that too in our book of having clear guidelines on what effective feedback is and really taking like that can-do attitude forward with teachers and students.
Karen, did you, or did yeah, Karen, you're good?
I'm good. I would just say, we did include some pitfalls and some specific things in the book that I think came out of our own experience with ourselves and with other teachers that we've been exposed to, just how feedback can be given that may not really be feedback at all or may not be very effective feedback. And I think some of the other questions perhaps will hone in on some of those specifics as well.
Yes, I wanted to ask a follow-up question, but I think I'm going to jump in the next question if I do that. So I want to give Sarah a chance to jump in.
Yeah, so the one thing that I would add, I think, to what they've said is when I think of correction, like error correction, and you're looking at like a rubric of the different domains, and there might be one domain that is accuracy or language control. And if you're always doing error correction, you're only hitting on that one domain every single time. And I think you forget that communication is more than just accuracy, right? It's the words, it's the vocabulary, it's your organization within your sentences, it's the tone. So, I think what we're bringing to light is, we need to help learners find other ways that actually help them grow and really challenge themselves in pushing their communication skills, um, instead of always just focusing on the accuracy. And I think sometimes, like they were saying, it's a pitfall because it's easy for us. It's a controllable variable, right? Like it's right or it's wrong. But I think um, really focusing more on what is the learner, what can they do next, giving them ideas to grow in their language, so that they're challenged and excited to do something different and to create.
So the next question is maybe a little redundant. In your experience, how is feedback commonly misunderstood or mistaken for something else? And I think everybody who read the book, at some point you said, well, praise is not feedback. And I was like, well, what do you mean praise is not feedback? Like because, we're always told like it has to be positive reinforcement. How is it? Can you and starting with you, Sarah, if you want, can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that praise can be feedback. It's just not effective feedback when we're talking about promoting language growth, right? So, yeah, feedback can come in different forms, but when you're actually wanting students from one chapter to the next chapter to grow and develop their language skills, then just a vague, hey, you did a good job, doesn't really tell them what they're doing, and celebrate that. And then it doesn't tell them where to go. So, I do praise students in my classroom. I think praise is a really good motivator. It connects students, but I'm not doing that when I'm handing back their, summative assessment. It's more like I'm coaching them. Like, hey, here's what you've done, and here's what you could do the next time.
Megan, do you want to jump in?
Yeah. I will share that I once actually gave a presentation on this book and our feedback, and the participants walked away and said, well, Megan said we can't give praise anymore. And I was like, whoa, 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 that's not what I meant. So I actually like this question because it clarifies that. And like Sarah said, there is a place for praise. It's just remembering like that's not going to move them forward in language growth. So you can still praise, but think of where are those times going to be where you're actually going to focus on their language skills and how they could grow to the next level. That's really where you want to capitalize the effective feedback framework. And I think the other thing about feedback being misunderstood or mistaken is it's not that students might not need error correction. They do, but think about like where's the place for that and what are the systems you have that you can capitalize on it, right? Like digital learning management systems are really good at telling kids right and wrong answers when it's fill in the blank or multiple choice. So like let the systems and the technology do that for you, and then you spend your time giving the effective feedback, which is going to take a little bit of time to look at their work and figure out which comment, right, would be best for them, or figure out what self-assessment you're going to use on this formative activity so they can figure out where they are and where they're going next. So you can certainly still give praise, you can certainly still do error correction, but think about like what are the systems you have that can really manage that for you, and then how can you use that so you can manage your time on the feedback side to make it really effective?
Hmm. Karen, praise or no praise?
Praise is a slippery slope. And it can certainly be encouraging, right?
Mhm.
And the more specific the praise is, I think that's where it can be really effective. But as soon as an educator, if I give praise and then I don't give it to that student the next time, they know it and they feel it. Or if I give praise to one student and then don't give it to another one, it can be very it can create uneasiness, and I think that can be difficult. Um, However, we can certainly celebrate what students are doing, right?
Mhm.
We're celebrating the work that they're doing. And the other thing about this misunderstood or mistaken feedback, one thing that I've, throughout my teaching, I have realized this is my communication with students. This is my relationship builder with my students. This is, feedback is the primary way that students and educators, learners and educators communicate with each other. So
Hmm.
that's why it feels so important to get it right, you know, to get to build that relationship in a positive way around something that is really meaningful to them and to me and motivates them.
Hmm. Yeah. Thank you. We're going to talk about AI a little bit. I know it's a touchy subject for some. Um, do you think AI avatars, or I'm really talking about, the AI chatbots, do you think AI chatbots are capable of providing high quality feedback? And why or why not? And what are aspects of effective feedback that really relies on human qualities? Karen, do you want to start this time?
Sure, I will. Yeah, AI chatbots, they're pretty good, some of them. They're pretty amazing. I'm actually doing a pilot with one group now. It and I think the last time we met, I mentioned how students had submitted a video and they were going to comment on it, and before they even got a chance to comment on it themselves, the AI bot had already put in their own comments. And
Huh.
and that's where I feel like that can be disempowering.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, on the one hand, I think AI can be a great tool. It's here. We need to learn to use it.
Yeah.
It's a reality where we can't, shut it out, nor should we. I, but we can get stuck in that feeling of having to go through AI for everything, like not owning or trusting our own judgment anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I can tell you that even for presentation titles, I almost never put in a presentation title for a conference or a workshop without running it through AI first. And on the one hand, I don't think it's disempowering, but it's also like, wow, am I not trusting myself to do this anymore? It's kind of that weird place. But I
I
think
hear you.
what we really need to do, we need to be careful about two things. One is if and when we share work into generative AI, where does it go and does it become part of that? And
Mm-hmm.
yes, this isn't copywritten work that our students are producing, but it is their work. It's
Yeah.
not ours to
Mm-hmm.
share. So I think we need to be careful about that. And then secondly, I just think of the empowerment piece. I want my students to be empowered by technology. Generative AI is included in that. I don't want them to be disempowered. So when they start giving up some of their judgment or their ability to self-assess, or they're relying on it in a way that they could do themselves and maybe they don't feel that they can do, I want to regain their power and I want to tell them, no, you are the final judge. This is a tool for you. It's a thought partner. It's
Mm-hmm.
not, it doesn't have to be the final word.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you. It's a very thoughtful answer. I appreciate. Megan, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I was actually at the ACTFL convention this fall, and they had a whole bunch of AI sessions, and they even had an AI corner. So it was all the things. I went to a couple of them, and a couple of really good takeaways I got from it were, as Karen mentioned, AI is a great brainstorming partner. I think that's where you can really capitalize on its strength. But there's always a need for professional judgment or just your professional um, expertise and looking at it. So like even if you're brainstorming, right, you're going to look through what it brainstorms and you're going to pick out, well, this is what fits best based on what it is I want to accomplish. So I would take that into account with feedback too of can we use AI to give feedback? We can. And I actually watched one teacher run something through AI for feedback. But she was thoughtful about it.
Mhm.
And then there was different layers you could do. And so what she did is she made sure she put her rubric into AI. So if it was going to give feedback, right, make sure it's based on the indicators you were going to evaluate. And then the AI tool gave her did run her students' work through that. So that's something you just have to think about or just maybe discuss with your school on what's the policy of running student work through AI. I don't know what that is for you, but you might want to check.
Yeah.
That was okay with her. They had a tool that the district had some purchasing power with, and that they all could run it through this tool. And the AI with the rubric gave glows, grows, and wonderings. And I kind of read over the sample that she showed. The glows were largely achievement comments, but there were a lot of them. So you might want, like, if you were going to use it, you might need to read through and say, which one would you want the student to have? Or even if the students were looking at all of them, you might have to tell the kids, like, pick one glow you want to work on. Um, the grows were really interesting because they were advice. They weren't questions. So that was really interesting to see. And I might even say, like, maybe skip over the glows because then the wonderings were questions. So that was more based on our free feedback framework. So again, you just have to use a little bit of professional judgment of like, okay, I can see what it's doing, but either I need to look it over myself or I need to give my students guidance on maybe how to use this tool effectively. So I think
Mhm.
there's potential, but just think about how you're going to use your professional lens to kind of look it over and then present it, either use it or present it to your students.
Mm. Yep. Sarah, did you want to jump in?
Sure. So I actually work a little bit alongside Speakology AI. They're out of Florida.
Yeah, I tried them yesterday.
Yeah, with Ben. Yeah. So I've done a few presentations for them at conferences,
Mhm.
and I use it with my students. So if you're going to be doing AI, I would really highly recommend that you go with me. Because like for our district, it had to go through several layers of like privacy data to be, is it FERPA compliant? I think is, I'm
Yeah.
trying to think, what is like medical compliance? What is educational compliance? But I think it's FERPA. Um,
Yes, for
and
students.
so
Yeah.
their work is stored safely and it is deleted. It's not shared with third parties. So I would just caution you to make sure. I would never ask a student to go onto Google Chat. And some of that is because too, with like, for example, the Speakology, as it's a platform where I can go on and so I can see exactly what the students have said.
Mhm.
And so in working with Ben, we've looked at a lot too, is like, how do we give feedback? And as a teacher, I can control different options of how I want to give the avatar to give them feedback. And some of it can be in the form of a question. And it's also how frequently do you want, when do you want them? Do you want them to give it immediately? So there's different ways that teachers can do their settings. Um,
Mhm.
and I think for my students who, one, I think it's amazing because I'm a white Spanish teacher and those avatars are diverse. And
Mhm.
so students get to see themselves with others that are speaking their language,
Mhm.
um, or the language, the target language. And it's motivating. It's funny because today I just had a student was like, "Oh, I hate that, but I love it." Like,
Mhm.
because it's a lot, but you're at home, you're by yourself, there's less anxiety,
Mhm.
there's no one really, it's just a bot that's listening to you. So there's no real judgment. So
Mhm.
I'm excited to see how this goes at the end. So I definitely feel like AI can help speed along the process. But depending on how that feedback comes back, I think will be, and that's where I would be choosy with whatever company I'm using.
Mhm. I had an interesting experience with AI today. I created a little text. I was practicing on, we were working in a group, working on a mission statement. And AI, if you're not working with a tool like Speakology, if you're just working with ChatGPT, AI is really there to please you. So when you're asking to give feedback on anything that you produce, you have to be very intentional about the way you ask the question because,
Mhm,
if you say, is this good? It's going to tell you why it's good. And if you say,
mhm,
what's bad about this? It's going to find things to say that are bad about it. So
mhm, mhm,
benefit of working with platforms like Speakology is that there are really some parameters and some structures and some guidelines in place to avoid this kind of pitfalls to some degree. So I thought that was very interesting. I started asking all kinds of questions. I asked, why is this rude? Why is this offensive? Why is this
mhm,
amazing? And every time, this is amazing because this is offensive because. And so
mhm.
feedback, we have to be super careful because it's going to tell us what we want to hear. And obviously, that's not serving the students. Uh, Go ahead.
Can I add something to that too? Yeah, that's so funny because yeah, that absolutely happens, right? Um, One of the things that I think, and of course, AI can learn you, an avatar can learn a person for sure. But right now, I do think that at this moment in time, as an instructor with my learners, I can tap into prior experiences that we've shared. I can, I can bring their memory back to a time when something happened, and that's going to help us move forward in the situation. Or I might be able to read them and say, ooh, this is not a good moment to give too much feedback in that area. Or this is not, she's not having a good day, and I think AI just doesn't pick up on that. And I think that is part of the art of teaching is to move in the space with other people and react with them and to them, right?
Exactly.
The other piece is AI can be great in English, Spanish, Mandarin, but we get to some other languages, and I mean, maybe Megan wants to speak to this because she works with so many different teachers of so many different languages that try it in Dutch. It's not going to be the same, because I've put stuff in German and in Dutch, you don't get the wealth of the internet in the same way.
Yes. I'm looking at our list of participants. So at ICLS, we teach 85 languages. And we teach, Belushi, for example, which I didn't even know was a language. I'm learning every day. So we have teachers who teach a lot of less commonly taught languages. And it really goes both ways because, I had a teacher who was teaching, I think, Khmer, Cambodian, and there really is nothing on ChatGPT cannot handle Khmer. There is really no a language model that can handle it. But at the same point, talking with teachers teaching Mongolian or even the languages where the models are really weak, the teachers say, but for us, we don't have a textbook and we can still save quite a bit of time in lesson planning and creating resources because really compared to the Spanish teacher who teaches next to me, it's really not the same task that we are up and against. So it's really interesting how in some ways it's really increasing the inequities and in some other ways it seems to be making up for some of them. Megan, I would love to hear your perspective with indigenous languages. Um,
Yeah, in my district, we have Hmong, which is a language originally out of China, but in Southeast Asia. We have Karen, which originated in Myanmar. And then we have a large population of Somali speakers. And very similar to you, they're not using AI so much to get text out of it or even language out of it, but they are using it for ideas, right? To brainstorm the lesson planning or how would I structure something. Or I had some teachers, they use it as a brainstorm partner again.
mhm.
So they put in, here's something I'm teaching and I want to integrate, I'm looking to integrate X. What ideas could you give me? And then they're able to kind of go through and pick that out. And finding resources. So again, depending on the language and where the resources are at, but they can start looking for different resources. So yeah, it is a little bit challenging. It's hard for me to do like even a PD on AI because not everybody uses it in the same way. But I do think the brainstorming and the lesson planning, streamlining piece of it can be applicable to everyone.
Absolutely. Thank you. I'm going to skip over the next question because we're a little bit behind and there are some questions I really want to get to. Um, this is the next question is about the way students react to feedback. Especially this last week of the course, when I asked teachers to share their takeaways, they said that sometimes they're a little bit discouraged by the students' lack of interest in feedback and how students and also their parents, they tend to focus only on the grade and it's just we put so much time and effort in giving feedback. Um, how can we change this mindset? Like it's not about the grade, it's about the growth. Um, do you wanna start, Megan, since you were the last one to go?
Sure. Um, this is one of those things you kind of have to make it present over and over again for them to latch onto it. It won't be a one and done conversation. It'll be an ongoing conversation you have to have like multiple times. Um, I knew that it was working really well when one time I had a teacher. She came in and she covered for my class. She was the FACS teacher, the family and consumer science teacher. So she came and covered my class because I was attending a meeting. And she came and found me the next day and she said, I need to know what you're doing with your students because the way your students talk in your classroom is completely different to how mine talk. And I was like, what do you mean? And she's like, they're talking about their learning and their growth. And she's like, mine don't talk like that at all. So it is possible, even in with students who are highly focused on grades or parents who are highly focused on grades. And grades are inevitable. It's just something that we have to do in order to fulfill the system. But um, just thinking about all those little shifts that you can make of, did you put your um, do you have performance domain indicators, right? And then are you using them with all your lessons? Like with my formative activities, I was putting them up or I had them on the wall. So if I didn't have them on a slide at last minute, I could walk over to the wall and say, okay, we're going to do this activity. Remember how you meet and exceed. So reiterating that over and over again, doing a lot of the self-assessments is extremely helpful with the students. And they won't get it the first time or maybe the third time. So you're going to need to do them multiple times until you're almost training their brain a little bit about what do I look for and where do I need to go next. I also really liked a lot of the make it visible strategies where kids were highlighting or circling or color coding. The kids really like that too because everything was just so vibrant. They could really see what it is that they could do or they'd look at it and be like, oh, I don't have enough of this color or these circles, right? So I'm going to go add to it before I turn this in, which is exactly what I wanted them to do. So um, there's no great trick to this other than you kind of just have to keep doing it over and over again. But I can promise that when it's the thing that you focus on, that it will be evident and you'll have students see it, you'll have other teachers see it too. And my always great win was before every performance assessment, I would always go through the indicators and we would talk about meets and exceeds. And I always, on the last performance assessment, I would give the kids the meets indicators and I would leave the exceeds blank. And I would say, okay, work with your partner and tell me what it is to exceed in each of those domains. And it was so great. I saw sixth, seventh, and eighth graders. They were always able to, not spot on, but summarize this is what it would look like at the next level. And I always thought that was so great because that was my indicator. Okay, they know exactly what it is to meet and they have an idea of how to exceed. And now we're able to go do that summative assessment and think about what that looks like.
Awesome. Yeah. Almost feels like it feels like this is a framework that could be extended to other subjects, right? Like language arts and anyway, I'm sure they have their own frameworks. Um, Sarah, did you want to jump in and add anything?
Sure. Can you repeat the question? I'm so
Yes.
sorry.
So it's about basically students sometimes teachers get discouraged because they spend some time
Oh,
creating
yeah. Okay.
back
So
and
I
then
get it because with my students, but what I will say is like what Megan was saying, it's a cultural shift. So it
mhm.
doesn't happen overnight. Um, but what is nice is actually so then when your students or your parents are asking about a grade, you can say what that means. what the grade means, right? So it's like, oh, you want an A. Well, getting an A would require you to do such and such a thing, right? So students now understand what is the A, what is the B. It means something. It's not just I got 12 out of 15 or whatever, right? So
Yeah.
I think it actually tells you what they can do with the language. And so I would turn the conversation around and instead I'd be, they're like, well, why didn't I get an A? I was like, well, that's a really good question. Let's look at what you'd have to include to have gotten that, right? Or that score. Like, did you show? Because what's really nice, it's all evidence based.
Mm-hmm.
It's right in your performance. Did you use these things? Oh, I didn't see that. I saw that once, but I didn't see it enough. Like how, and they're like, okay. So it really is about the learning. And that's the shift I would encourage you to make because you're not doing more work. You're just seeing it from a different perspective with them of like, well, if you wanted that grade, then what would that have to look like? Right. And so I don't know if that answered the question, but
Well, that answers my question because as a learner, I would have loved that. I would have really, really enjoyed that, because I'm wired that way. I think it would have been really useful in my own learning. Karen, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, so we definitely focused on observable, coachable elements here. So, the rubrics are all rubrics to assess observable and coachable things about language, right? We know language develops and is acquired, and we pulled these then, from well-researched, actful sources as well as our own research. Um, but I have to say that, using words instead of numbers and letters is
Yeah.
incredibly powerful. So we always go back to the words of the rubric. Like Sarah was saying, it's that we can explain what it is, or like Megan was saying, it's here on the wall. Um, and there's no more point begging, there's no more argument about it. Those were times that I was so happy to see the end of. But the other thing that I want to say is, it becomes a conversation. I think Megan mentioned the word conversation too, but we're co-constructing this with our learners, really. It's like, okay, so here's where we want to get. How are we going to get here? This is my plan for the day. How does this sound to you? What is it that you want to actually get out of today's lesson? You tell me, and then you're going to self-assess on that at the end of the lesson. Put it in their court, empower them, motivate them. When we think about like prioritizing accuracy or giving too much feedback, I mean, prioritizing accuracy, too much feedback, wow, that is demotivating, right? So don't do that, think of that glow and grow, and that really make that simple. And then also that empowering, how do we consistently use a rubric? That's super empowering because students learn that and they can do something with it, as well as the self-assessments. We empower them with those, the making it visible, or being able to self-assess using that. So I
Mhm.
think that, we come at it from a number of places,
Mhm.
always with the student and what's going on for them in mind.
Do you have this conversation with parents sometime?
Absolutely.
Are they
Absolutely. And if possible, we have the students, with their work and their
Mm,
parent telling them what they did and what they didn't yet do, but what they're going to be learning how to do better.
mm. Yes, I mean you really can't argue with that.
Mhm.
It's right there. Um, a question about the timing. I mean, it's so imprinted in my brain. The best feedback is immediate feedback, and it's such a balance. What's your take on, and Karen, if you want to start since you were last in the previous, what's your take on what's the right timing for feedback?
Well, isn't it Zaretta Hammond who says, "Well, it still matters," right? I think that's her famous line, or one of many. But I mean, we have assessment of, we have assessment for, and we have assessment as
Okay.
learning, right? You can have assessment of learning, that's after it's done, the assessment for learning, that's the feedback that feeds you forward. And that assessment as learning, I think that's the piece that we really are focusing on. It's like, how do we actually use assessment and feedback along the way? and make it just integrate it into the learning. Um, I do think that people are different, and some students need longer to reflect on something. I also think that as you go through the levels, immediate feedback is probably best for novice because there's a smaller chunk of language that they're dealing with, and
Mm-hmm.
you can make a correction without interrupting a flow as much as maybe, you know, making a comment or a correction might interrupt a flow in a longer, like a more intermediate or advanced. But the kind of glow and grow feedback that we're talking about, I think could be, yeah, I think immediate feedback is great. I also think that AI can do a great job with that, with some of the vocabulary, grammatical structure building.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah, sure.
but I do think that, yeah, encouraging students to notice along the way
Mm-hmm.
and that assessment as piece are the two things that I guess would work into timing. But I do think that's a human thing too. How do we give feedback? When do we give it? Are they going to receive it well at that moment?
Absolutely. I mean, sometimes a student is talking, and I know that if I say one word, that student is going to fall apart. So I know that it's not going to be productive. And again, that's something an AI cannot do, have that sense. Oh, I know my student. I know this particular student. She wants all the feedback. She wants to know exactly everything she did that wasn't perfect. And other students, I'm choosing. I'm going to pick and choose like two or three things to focus on and choose my moment. So it's definitely something AI can't do right now. Sarah, did you want to jump in?
Sure, I would just echo, the timeliness is important. Um, I think when you're talking like within a school classroom setting, just because we move so quickly with our curriculum, but there's the human element. I think things happen where teachers, we have lives. So I don't, you know, I'm not, that's one thing that I just think you do what you can do,
Mm-hmm.
because there's always learning happening. And within a rubric, you're not going to move from novice high to intermediate low overnight.
No,
It's a continuum, it's a progression, right? And so you need weeks of practice of how do we do that in order to perform it. You could take a scaffolded activity, but for them to actually like own that learning and do that for themselves, it's going to take a while. So you can, with our curriculum, like we move forward, right? And so I might have 3 or 4 days that go by, but I'm moving kids into intermediate low, whether
hmm
or not they have their feedback, right? They will get their feedback, but we're still working within that continuum, that space. Um, so that's that. Like I said, timely is awesome, but I also know that things happen in life, and um, we need to give ourselves some grace too.
absolutely. Thank you for saying that. Megan, did you want to add on?
Yeah, I'll just I think the line while it still matters is really important.
Yeah.
And I think actually there's also different ways of looking at it. And so one of the things we talk about in our book is if you keep the same set of performance domain indicators all throughout a course, then while it still matters actually is happening all the time, right? Because you can always give them feedback on that same set of indicators to move them into that next level, like Sarah was saying. And there's so that I think gives the grace that maybe we need. And then I think, you know, utilize like again, I utilize those self-assessments all the time with my kids because I knew I just wouldn't have the capacity to give them all their individualized feedback. So that was such a huge help for me of, doing my part of making sure I explain the indicators multiple times, but then giving them the opportunities to do that self-assessment. And then something that was really helpful to me is as they would do their self-assessments or even on their summative assessments, if they were indicating where they are on the rubric and they were correct, they didn't need any other feedback from me. right? I only had to really give them feedback on areas maybe we disagreed, and I needed to explain, you thought you were here, but I really see you here. Let's have that very brief discussion, or let me give you a comment to get you on the right track. Um, and then just unique things of uh, I did play with the timelines a bit because sometimes there was reality and sometimes also it actually worked in my favor in ways that were really surprising. So, for example, with presentational, I would have them do their presentational summative assessment and I would keep it. And the next day I would give it back and I say, okay, you're going to do your make it visible strategy and self-assess before I give you a grade. And the kids commented they really liked doing it the next day because then they kind of went back in with a fresh mind and kind of saw, oh, I can see what I did or how I might have done different, done things differently. And there's been other times like I've hung on to an assessment until right before we get to I give them the grades or I might have given them the feedback, but sometimes I'll bring back a conversation right before they have the next assessment of, remember you were here last time and think about what you need to get there. And that's been helpful because it's, as they're gearing up for that next assessment, it's fresh in their minds. So while it still matters, but again, if you have the indicators, the same indicators throughout your course, then while it still matters is really all the time. And that gives us a little bit of grace to play with those timelines.
Absolutely. What you said just made me think of something, and that's maybe a question for Sarah, in relation to Speakology. Um, I played with Speakology yesterday, and it's been so many years since I studied German, spoke any German, so many years. But I was so surprised, first of all, that there was a little bit of German left, in my brain. But then I looked at my feedback because Speakology does give you this pretty extensive feedback, and you have the ability to listen back to the dialogue and even listen back to yourself. So I listened back to myself, and my first thought was, "What is this thick accent, French accent that comes through my German?" It was pretty horrible. But Sarah, do you think that AI has a place in providing some materials for students to self-assess?
For sure. Yeah, I mean, I think it's just getting started, honestly. So I think just one, I mean, I will tell you just within my classroom, there's a learning curve for students.
Mhm.
There's a familiarity curve of this is weird, this is awkward. So especially when you're working with high schoolers. So there's just a lot of that. I guess you're adding that on to what you're already doing with your own learning management system and all these other things. So it's another thing to juggle, but I think what it has the capacity of is moving students faster, expediting our process, because what they're getting at, what I'm giving them the opportunity to do is practice Spanish at home for 30 minutes a week.
Yes,
Nobody at their home knows Spanish.
and that's
And
amazing.
so, and they're able to listen and have that dialogue. So I don't give homework in my classes, but this is something that I feel is so powerful at home that they can do. And I even had students that come in for their own speaking assessment and have used unprompted speakology to practice.
Practice.
But going back to Megan was saying self-assessment, I just got done with the assessment in my Spanish 5, and we're really working from intermediate, mid to high. We're getting there. And so we have on our LMS, we use Schoology, students record, and I have them record all the time. Now, it's been researched a little bit, but I will do what's called delayed grades. So I give them their feedback, but I don't give them their grade.
Oh, okay.
So the focus then becomes on the skills that they're doing, and then their grade comes later. And so that way we're having a conversation about that. We started Thursday, Friday, we'll go Monday, Tuesday, and then Wednesday their grades will go in. But their grades don't go in until they go back and they listen, they self-assess themselves on this rubric, right? And then they hand that in to me, and then I'll see how we align. So that's kind of how, because they know what they have to do to get the A, which in my class to get the A, right, is going into intermediate high. So they're looking for that, and that way they can see, and I always have them record because I'm one person giving a grade and I can always make an error. But then it's a great conversation piece. And so that's just something that's happening right now in my classroom.
Awesome. Lily asked the questions, what is the AI tool to give language feedback? So I put in Speakology. I also know Tokyo, Lily. There's one called Gliglish. I think that's the name. But I mean, it's this AI bubble, so those tools are coming and going. But Speakology does in my opinion, a good job of aligning itself with the ACTFL framework. The so it is an AI chatbot. So it's conversation practice with an AI, either just audio or a video avatar. And when you're done with your conversation, it provides an assessment. So it's not the assessment is part of the experience. And like Sarah said, it's the beginning. It's not perfect, but it's very interesting. It's very interesting. So we just have a couple minutes. I have to make a selection here in the questions. I feel like we've discussed AI enough. I think I'd like to conclude with a discussion of how learners at different proficiency levels use the feedback differently. Either this, how are they doing with self-assessment? How are they handling the feedback that they receive? Is there a difference based on your proficiency level? And I Sarah, do you want to jump in? I kind of lost track of the.
Sure. So I I go back to sports a lot, and I know I like, but so I always think like coaching basketball, and I just metaphors are my on-ramp. And so when you think about a sport, and let's say, you have your JV sport, right? I have 10 athletes that are going to play, but not all 10 are going to start, right? And so I have athletes that are doing really well, and I have athletes that are going to be on the bench more. And so I think about that within our classroom. We have a classroom, and they're all there, but they're all at kind of different points in their learning journey. And so what I enjoy about the Glow and Grow is that it really is differentiated in the fact that my feedback to, maybe let's just say, the person that's riding the bench is going to be very different than the feedback I'm going to give to the person that's already up here, right? So it's very specified for that student. And the other thing is when you use the Glow and Grow, every student is getting a Glow student or Glow comment. Every student hears, look what you can do. Even if you're riding the bench, even if you're at the lower end in that classroom of that performance level, you're going to hear something good. Look where you're at. Look what you can do. And that can be a motivator. And then, hey, let's get you here. So you are constantly differentiating between different performance levels, and within the performance level, right, the different domains. So it's a lot, but once you really work with it, you're going to hear students ask the questions about the skills, about how they're communicating. And I think that's where you want your conversations to be.
Great. Megan, did you want to jump in?
Yeah. I think one of the great things about the book is we tried to pick strategies that would work for a variety of learners. And so, like, when I think about the self-assessments, I used all those types of self-assessments with my learners at the novice level. So I think they can span the range of novice, intermediate, and advanced. I also think they cross a lot of different languages too. So something that's really great is like my Korean teachers use these tools like my Hmong teachers, like my Spanish teachers. And so even though they're teaching a variety of learners at different levels, like they can still have a conversation as like a level one group and how they're seeing student performance and giving feedback. And then they can have like an intermediate group. Um, and I also have a lot of teachers, particularly at the higher levels, where we end up combining different levels together, right? Because you might not have, Karen's very familiar with this, she did it all the time. But you might not have enough students registered in your upper level courses. And so, like, We have a Spanish 3-4 class. I have a German 3-4-5 class. I have a Korean for Korean speakers 1 and 2 class. And so one of the great things is, again, if you're using those performance domain indicators, they're just expanding the range a little bit. And so they have a range for their one level, and then they might extend it for their other level. And then students can kind of see, oh, this is where I'm at, and this is where I keep going to. So that even when you're working with maybe multiple levels in one teaching class or one teaching block, you can still capitalize on the tools and the framework is still the same, and you just have to extend that range a little bit up. So I think that's been really great to see teachers be able to utilize that and um, see it across languages and across levels, even when you have multiple levels in a course.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Karen?
Yeah. I took it a little bit differently as far as, at the novice or the intermediate or the advanced level, how might students react to feedback? But, certainly when you're working with performance domain indicators that are in on a continuum, that is just a huge strength because then you're working with a consistent overarching goals, right? So there's a great advantage then in the classroom to hear students who are at a higher level than you are and know
Yes.
what they're doing. Even if you don't know how to do it, you can pick it out sometimes. Sometimes we can see it even if we can't do it ourselves. Um, and then I do think that, over time, my students certainly became better at knowing how to self-assess, better at understanding the rubric. And so, in level one, they learned it, they were certainly able to do it. And I applaud Megan's students for being able to, fill in that exceeds column at the end. That's amazing. Um, but then, by the time they're in my level two or my level three or my level four, they know the routine. And I'm not a very routinized person, but I can appreciate routine when I have so many things to do. When I have 6 different levels that I'm teaching, or 6 different preps, or 5 different preps, I need routine, and I know my students do too. So I think that helps provide that one thing that we can all focus on. And then lastly, I think that, novice, oftentimes they'll take the feedback and it's just more concrete. They'll apply it and that will be a quick change or a quick, like, not really quick necessarily, but, one thing happens and then they move into this other level. They know, okay, I can now take my words and put them into phrases. Okay, I can see that. Whereas at a higher level, between an intermediate and advanced, it's much more maybe conceptual. It's much more, okay, I'm finding my own voice in this
Yes.
language. And so I
Yes.
do think that just the feedback on the performance domain indicators show that,
Mm-hmm.
but it
Mm-hmm.
definitely has a different feel when we're
Yeah.
working with students at different levels.
Yeah. Do you have a couple more minutes? We have one question. So I'm going to ask her to unmute. Lily, you can go ahead and ask your question if you'd like.
Sure. Thank you, everyone. I really like you guys' presentations and talking is really lovely, and I learned a lot. I totally agree with you, ladies, that giving feedback is not error correction. However, I got a question here. Okay, maybe because I haven't read the book yet. Maybe it's already in the book. Okay. So my students usually adults, their different levels, but I can see some of them constantly make the same mistakes again and again. No matter what I did, say, oh, you made mistake again. It's a very simple grammatic structure, and you just follow the English way. It should be the Chinese way. So if error correction is not the right way, and what would I provide for this kind of like a patent mistakes? Very simple, not sophisticated at all. Just they're speaking the English way.
I let you decide who wants to answer.
I can jump in with something first and then,
Sure,
yeah,
that'd be great. Thank you.
I'm sure. I do think what I'm hearing possibly is the importance then of them understanding that they are making a mistake and when they are making it and when they might not be, or when they can hear a mistake and when they don't hear a mistake. I would set up something where, you can record them, or you could even give them examples. Say it this way or say it this way. Which is right and which way did you say it? And, like really structure that. It's a way of kind of using that make it visible self-assessment, but instead of being, highlighting it, it might be in spoken words, so you want them to listen to it. But I do think that the first step is for them to hear it and to recognize the difference between what they're doing and what the way that's going to be more communicative and more meaningful to a listener to understand what that way is.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's helpful. Maybe they'll make the same mistake again the next time during our sessions. Yeah, I just simply hate to say, wow, you made the same mistake. It just sounds so negative. Is that right?
But when
Yeah,
they self-assess, they can find it themselves. That's empowering. Sorry, Sarah, go ahead.
Okay. Oh, sure. Yeah.
no, and I would also say, sometimes is it that big of a mistake? You know, a couple of things I think about when students are learning language is there's so much going on. And so I would challenge you just to maybe continue to move forward. Because sometimes it will take a long time, right? And so you don't want to also, what's the word, hinder or like slow down their learning more because of like one mistake that I've got students who will still do the same things and I'm like, you know what, that might just, it's going to have to get itself corrected and I'll keep listening to it, but I don't want to, like you're saying, discourage them from continuing on, right? Like if I'm always like, hey, you're making the same mistake, I just have to at some point kind of let that go and hopefully bring in a lot of input where they can see it in natural, the way it is authentically, or pair them up with somebody who has it, because sometimes it just takes a lot of time. Because you don't hear it. And why don't you hear it? Because you're thinking about what you're trying to say. You're thinking of so many things. So sometimes I would say, how important is that error? Is it okay just to let them go, knowing you're going to kind of keep an eye on it? But let them move on and do other things. And sometimes, like with reading, like you have aha moments and you're like, oh, and then other things kind of fall into place. So, and you don't want to keep people from not continuing their literacy skills from one thing, right? So, because there's a lot of different skills that you're learning. So, I would say maybe,
Oh, you accidentally muted yourself, Sarah.
I would say just as a teacher, I understand the difficulty of wanting to correct students
Yes.
with that. So I would try to maybe then practice not correcting that student, or like on the side at some point, just say, hey, I'm still noticing that this is happening. Can we figure out like when is it happening? But I wouldn't, I would try to leave that off the table. And then that student might feel freer to do other things.
And actually,
Okay.
paired with
Yeah.
that, one of the things we wrote in the book, right by the pitfalls, was if a good guideline for error correction is, does it cause a breakdown in communication, right? Because if it's going to cause a breakdown, then we want to address it so they can move forward and have a conversation. If it's not causing a breakdown, you might want to give them feedback in a different area. And then, like Sarah said, with repeated exposure, it might take some of them, it takes longer for it to click versus other students. And so they just might need that repeated exposure through text, through conversations, through input before it clicks for them.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I really enjoy this conversation, and I'm very grateful that you were able to all come and participate. So thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed it too.
Very much. Thank you for having us. We really appreciate we put our heart and souls into this book. We spent a long time, and it is just so much fun for us now to see how it is impacting other people and to get some questions and to continue our own thinking. So we really appreciate the conversation as well. Thank you.
My pleasure. I'm thanking somebody in the chat. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you very much, Megan. I hope you have a great evening. This will be recorded and posted to our YouTube channel. Maybe I'll do a little bit of editing of the beginning, and if I'm motivated, I'll add in the questions at the beginning of each section. We'll see how motivated I am to work with iMovie tomorrow. But thank you so much for your time, and I hope you have a great week and a great holiday season. Thank you.
You.
Thank you. Bye. Bye, everybody.